we're live from the ANTV news station. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joe Aura. To our viewers around the world, from Kenya, Spain, Barcelona, wherever you'll be watching from, you'll be with us for the next 30 minutes, where we'll cover recent news and developing stories around Africa. Stay tuned. A historic beat in the history of Africa, as the United States of America backs Africa to be on the seat of the United Nations Secretary Council. What does this mean for Africa, the continent, in terms of international decision-making?
Is it time for Africa to reshape global diplomacy? We explore a historic moment in global diplomacy as the United States backs Africa's bid for permanent representation on the United Nations Security Council. This marks a potential shift in global power dynamics, raising important questions about Africa's role in shaping international policies. Africa's case for permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, a pivotal institution in maintaining global peace and security, remains dominated by 5 permanent members who hold the veto power. This structure, unchanged since 1945, excludes Africa, a continent home to over 1.2 billion people and some of the most pressing security challenges. African nations currently occupy only 3 rotating, non-permanent seats without veto
by
power.
The UN Security Council continues to hamper efforts to maintain international peace and security.
78 years since its formation, the structure of the United Nations Security Council remains largely unchanged.
The Council is, by all intents and purposes, dysfunctional, undemocratic, non-inclusive, unaccountable, autocratic, and at best, opaque.
Africa and its 1.4 billion people remain excluded from its key decision-making structures.
In light of this, the US has expressed support for granting 2 permanent seats to African nations, though with a caveat: these seats will not include the veto power.
Announced that the United States supports expanding the Security Council to provide permanent representation for countries from Africa, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, that in addition to the countries we long supported for permanent seats, India, Japan, and Germany. In addition to non-permanent memberships for African countries, the United States supports creating 2 permanent seats for Africa on the Council. It's what our African partners seek, and we believe this is what is just.
Reporting from Afro Nation Television, I'm Jawahir Abdi.
Thank you for that special report, Jawahir Abdi, and now joining us back in studio. Jawahir, if you may please tell us why this proposal has sparked heated debate. What are the comments around it?
We take an in-depth look at why this proposal has sparked heated debates. Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio argues that Africa's inclusion is long overdue, calling for justice and equity in the Council's decision-making process. Analysts weigh in on the significance of this potential shift, highlighting how Africa's growing influence on the global security and economic matters strengthen its case for representation.
And now we're joined back in studio where we get expert perspectives on current issues from Dr. Beatrice Mbogo, a lecturer in media studies at Daystar University, who has an incredibly diverse journey spanning from journalism, public relations, curriculum design, and now lecturing.
I think it's about coverage. I know I'm reducing it to a very low level. Every time they write about Africa's representation on the United Nations Security Council, I feel like they don't have enough articles explaining. Sorry, it's raining here and that's thunder.
It's understandable.
Yeah. So I don't think we do enough coverage telling even Kenyans what it would mean for us if we were represented in there. And tell you, there are many people who don't even know anything about the UNSC.
Yeah.
Because nowadays I see, and I have always said, Kenyans don't read enough and they don't understand issues very well. So I would say, excuse me, I think the best thing the media can do is for first to do thorough coverage, and this has to be an agreement across all media, explaining to Kenyans through the most popular media what it means for us to have a country representing us on the UNSC. And it has to be done frequently, and like the same way we do for politics. I think this one needs to come in somewhere. The frequency, the clarity, the and insistence on that we must address issues affecting us. So I think that's what they need to do. That's the only way I feel they can do it. I don't think there's anything else the media can do. Do you?
That's a good answer, and you've touched on something that kind of pushes my next question, which is in terms of representation. Us as Africans, of course, we always put a huge amount of blame on the leaders, the African leaders, and in this case, these African leaders are the ones who, of course, represent us in those international stages. So, what communication strategy would you recommend for African leaders and African institutions to amplify their voices on that global platform?
You're asking very important questions, but I'm wondering, is it that we haven't been strategic enough, that we are not represented, or is it that certain nations choose to ignore us intentionally, no matter no matter what we do? So I feel like there's no strategy at all. The strategy is to make these people think differently about Africa, and it's slowly setting in, like with the cases of Mali and Senegal, where they no longer want to be controlled by them. For as long as we are allowing people to control us, then they will also not want to know our views, because they only value us for the minerals and the resources. So I think the strategy involves freeing ourselves completely from these people until they are ready to and we must be unrelenting that we want to negotiate with them for everything, whether it is our minerals, how they affect our politics, how they affect everything. Then that is the only time we'll be able to amplify our voices on the same level with them on the global platform.
Thank you for clarifying that. You've touched on very important details, and you've also brought back an important question. Is it us who are not using the right strategies, or is it them who are not listening to what we are saying exactly? And in Kenya, we have disturbing revelations where the elderly along the coast especially are facing abuse, violence, and a lot of accusation of witchcraft. We will cover how they're being accused because of land violence, land grabbing, and also how protection measures have not been kept for them along the years.
In Kenya's Kilifi region, the elderly have become targets of brutal violence, accused of witchcraft in an alarming trend. 74-year-old Tambala Jeffwa's story is a harrowing example. Attacked twice by his own relatives, Jeffwa lost an eye and nearly his life. His wife believes the accusations of witchcraft are a cover for land disputes, a common issue in rural Kenya where land ownership tensions can turn deadly.
Usiojulikana kwa siku chache zijazo.
Ujue vimeacha nakatwa tena.
They come out, you leave your child, we will kill you.
How many people have you killed?
You will
kama unavyoelewa nini, lakini kwa shamba tu kuna mwingine.
BBC Africa Eye's investigation reveals that these accusations are often driven by ulterior motives, such as inheritance conflicts, rather than genuine belief in witchcraft. This grim reality places Kenya's elderly in constant fear for their lives, raising critical questions about the protection of the vulnerable. In Nairobi, another disturbing issue has come to light: elder abuse in care homes. Undercover footage from the BBC Africa Eye investigation shows shocking mistreatment of elderly residents at the Presbyterian Church of East Africa Thogoto care home. The footage depicts staff members physically abusing the elderly, neglecting their medical needs, and serving food without basic hygiene. These revelations have sparked outrage and concern.
It's a national disaster which needs to be addressed urgently. If we don't address it, then we are losing our archives. The elderly we have, those are the only live archives you can believe and talk to, so we are losing it.
Like clockwork, the full moon appears every month in our sky, a sight so familiar that we often take it for granted. But about twice a year, over the course of a few hours, the full moon sports a decidedly different look. What causes this sudden change? A lunar eclipse occurs when the moon passes through the Earth's shadow, just as a solar eclipse occurs when part of the Earth passes through the moon's shadow. But the moon circles the Earth every month as it cycles through its phases, lining up at both full moon and new moon. So why don't eclipses happen twice a month? The reason is that the moon's orbit around the Earth is tilted relative to the Earth's orbit around the sun. Although the Earth and the moon always cast long shadows, they rarely shade each other thanks to the moon's orbital tilt. But if that's the case, why do eclipses happen at all? Throughout the year, the moon's orbital tilt remains fixed with respect to the stars, meaning that it changes with respect to the sun. About twice a year, this puts the moon in just the right position to pass through the Earth's shadow, causing a lunar eclipse. As the moon passes into the central part of the Earth's shadow, called the umbra, it darkens dramatically. Once it's entirely within the umbra, the moon appears a dim red due to sunlight scattered through the Earth's atmosphere. In fact, if you watched the eclipse from the surface of the moon, you'd see the sun set behind the entire Earth, bathing you in a warm red glow. Back home, you'll have to stay up late to watch a lunar eclipse, but if you do, you'll see the moon in rare form, and you'll catch a brief glimpse of our own planet's long shadow.
The Great Green Wall. We will cover how Africa is undergoing an ambitious initiative to do what? To drive climate change out of their neighborhoods. We will see how big data is being used in order to recover hectares of land in the Sahel region in Africa.
Big data is transforming the fight for sustainable development, providing powerful tools to combat climate change and manage resources effectively. One remarkable example of innovation is Africa's Great Green Wall, a bold initiative aimed at restoring 8,000 kilometers of degraded land across the Sahel region. Originally conceived as a wall of trees, this effort has evolved into a comprehensive development program. Since its launch in 2007, the African Union-led project has restored nearly 18 million hectares of land, helping communities withstand the devastating impacts of climate change and combat desertification. The Great Green Wall not only protects ecosystems but also transforms lives, creating a patchwork of green, productive landscapes across 11 countries. With big data providing critical insights, initiatives like this prove that sustainable solutions are within reach for our planet's most pressing challenges.
Permaculture instructor Andrew Milton journeys with the UN World Food Programme to the northern border of Senegal to see an initiative of land recovery project.
2 years ago, before the work, this was a barren wasteland. Nothing had been grown here for 40 years. When the UN World Food Programme told the villagers that they were going to bring this land back as part of the Great Green Wall, they said it was impossible. But here we are in Africa, in the desert at the northern edge of Senegal, and life has returned. And the stakes couldn't be higher, because when the soil washes away and land becomes a desert, then people leave. They head to the cities, and places like this just fall apart.
Within the Great Green Wall of Africa, that is harvesting rainwater, increasing food security, and rehabilitating the ecosystem. And still on big data, we take a look at the Power Elect event that happened this past year at Sarit Center Expo, where they were covering solar energy and its benefits for our environment in Kenya.
I liked your panel discussion.
Okay.
It was very informed. Seemed like a distinguished gentleman. We have a few questions for you. We'll just kick it off, starting with. So, Power Elect Kenya 2024 emphasizes on collaboration for achieving Kenya's 100% renewable goals by 2030. From your perspective, what are the most critical steps that Kenya should take in order to realize this vision?
Okay, I think the most important aspect is, like I discussed earlier, is partnerships. In terms of to realize the goals that you're talking about is to harness the power of partnerships. And so and that is what Power Africa, for example, is about. Power Africa is about partnerships. You have 12 US government agencies. You have 23 development partners. You have over 200 private sector players. So the practical steps then to take is this. First, we need to move away from merely discussions on partnerships to matchmaking. And matchmaking means then the commonality of interests and being able to identify the things that resonate insofar as energy access is concerned.
Yeah. Speaking more into partnership, how does the USAID Power Africa Empowerment Program align with the Power Elect theme, particularly in supporting Kenya's transition to renewable energy?
Easy, I think, and it's for that reason that I availed myself here, because Power Africa is having an ambitious goal by 2030. The intention is to accelerate access and universal access to electricity. So in being able to build on these connections across the continent, and particularly here in the country, our work is very simple. It's twofold, both on-grid and off-grid. In terms of off-grid, we offer a lot of technical assistance to the private sector, to government agencies and utilities. And this technical assistance includes access to finance. It includes business technical engineering assistance, business performance support. All these things basically seek to unlock the access question. So this is really why our interests align. And we believe that Power Elect, many other entities and players can work together towards matchmaking, because this is what the conference is about.
Thank you. Engineer, in your panel discussion, as well as in a lot of your answers, you talked about regional cooperation a lot. What role does it play through initiatives like regional power pools? What roles do they play in achieving Kenya's and East Africa's renewable goals?
Great. And the reason why we keep visiting that is because it's a global village. It's a global village. We want to be able to, we don't want to have constraints. You can generate where you are. There are many global initiatives, like, for example, One Solar, One World, One Globe. The idea is that you can generate anywhere and that power can be consumed somewhere else. So regional trade really unlocks opportunities across the continent.
Yeah.
That is why, as Africa partners with entities like the Africa Union, AUDA, NEPAD, the World Bank, many other agencies that seek to unlock Africa's single electricity market. The bigger the market, the better it is for all players. So that's why we keep talking about this regional trade, regional power pools. It is to escalate and to open up the continent for trade and for industrialization.
Action.
In a great step towards solutions, where in our education system, where Food for Education is sponsoring meals so that they can get children back into school. Ever studied while hungry? Well, this case will really interest you. Listen, Food for Education is providing food for millions of children in Africa and keeping data on how these children can be brought back to school and back to the school environment. Stay tuned.
We focus on the global crisis of child malnutrition, which disproportionately affects children in Africa. Despite efforts to combat hunger, millions of children are still missing out on the nutrients they need to grow, thrive, and succeed. Today, we highlight innovative solutions that are making a difference in Kenya, with a special focus on the work of Wawira Njiru and her program, Food for Education.
The issue, I saw it, but also I think it sort of saw me. The cost of childhood hunger is literally everything. A child won't come to class if they're hungry, if they haven't eaten. If they do make it to school, they're not going to listen, they're not concentrating. And so when the schools in Kenya said that the biggest issue kids had was they were fainting and they were hungry, I just knew that it was time to do something. In Africa particularly, school feeding programs, which have already been proven to impact children very positively, are not widespread. We have the lowest spread of school feeding programs across the world. A lot of that is because of supply chains, food production, making sure that food is getting to schools, that it's fresh, and also the cost of getting that food out. So that's something that we're trying to solve, to ensure that kids are getting food in schools every single day.
Across Africa, millions of children are affected by hunger and food insecurity, a situation exacerbated by climate change and poverty. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's recent report, The Race to Nourish a Warming World, reveals that over 400 million children globally are not receiving adequate nutrition. This crisis not only hinders physical development, but also impedes children's ability to learn and achieve their full potential. In Kenya, 1 in 4 children under 5 is stunted, particularly in rural areas where access to nutritious food is limited. The staggering statistics reminds us that while progress has been made, much more needs to be done to ensure that every child has access to the resources they need to grow up healthy. There are rays of hope. Food for Education, founded in 2016 by Kenyan social entrepreneur Wawira Njiru, has provided over 50 million meals to school children across Kenya. The program's innovative approach has made it one of the most cost-efficient meal programs in the world, serving nutritious meals for as little as 3 to 4 US cents per plate. This program not only fights hunger but also improves school attendance and academic performance. Leveraging technology through the Tap to Eat platform, children can pay for meals using smartwatches, making the process seamless and efficient for families.
And that wraps up this edition of Africa's Stories on Into the Unknown News Stories. Thank you for joining us, where we cover stories on Africa and their influence around the world. Stay alive, stay engaged, and of course, stay informed. You can keep up with the conversation. Follow me on Joe Aura at LinkedIn, Joe Aura TV on Twitter, and Joe Aura TV on Facebook as well.